Episode 73 is a follow-up of episode 72. So I kindly request you to first listen to episode 72 to connect with our discussion in episode 73. Thank you and enjoy this episode. Interesting. Yeah, I think we have quite a lot of actually discussed about the foreign interference and the collaborations as well. So, from that perspective, can you also provide examples of significant operations or intelligence successes by the Indian agencies like IB and R&AW that impacted India's foreign policy?
Okay, this is well, talking about the R&AW's foreign intelligence success. I think it is public knowledge now. Most people talk about it because the 70s was a period when most of India's foreign intelligence successes were credited to the R&AW's intelligence successes. That is the creation of Bangladesh, then subsuming Sikkim as a state within India. So these are some of the known successes, but I think that some of the lesser spoken about successes of Indian intelligence, especially since you're asking about the foreign policy realm, right? Let's
Yes.
talk about the IB for a moment, right? So when you talk about the IB, most people don't know this, but if you look at the decade of the 70s and 80s and so on, right? So you see a lot of these Palestinian terrorist attacks happening in Europe and in Africa and many other places.
Yes.
India is a country with one of the largest Muslim populations in the world, and that is also
Yes.
aware of the developments that happen in the Middle East because many of the Muslims here are connected with Muslims in the Middle East by way of familial connections, or they go there for work and so on and so forth. But
Yes.
despite all of these, right, we've hardly had any. We've had one or two stray attacks on the Israeli embassy or the Israeli diplomatic staff here and there. But in the last half a century, we've barely had any significant Palestine or related terrorist attacks in India, and the credit to that must go to the Indian Intelligence Bureau. As a
Yeah.
consequence, what has happened? India has been able to craft a foreign policy that balances both our requirements from Israel as well as show our solidarity with the Palestinian cause. Right, and that to me is one of the biggest successes of the Indian Intelligence Bureau as far as crafting of India's foreign policy towards the Middle East is concerned. Similarly, when we look at our immediate neighborhood, right, you look at Nepal, you look at Bangladesh, you look at China, Pakistan. In some fashion, all these countries were creating trouble inside India through sponsoring insurgencies and so on. Again, it goes to the
Yes.
credit of the Indian Intelligence Bureau that they developed a certain strategic outlook, a strategic format, framework, through which they've been able to peacefully resolve many of these insurgencies. And that has allowed us to have a very different kind of a foreign policy with many of these countries. Yes, otherwise we would have had to be treating all our neighboring countries as we are treating Pakistan today. Right? These are very
Yes.
subtle foreign policy achievements that do not become easily evident to a casual observer, but we must identify them, we must recognize them. Right?
Absolutely.
So similarly, when it comes to the R&AW as well, when you asked me about the roles and responsibilities as well, one thing that I failed to mention is India's own covert operations, right? So one of the tasks given to the R&AW immediately after its creation was that we have to maintain a sufficient degree of influence in India's neighborhood. Because what Indira Gandhi did was she came up with a policy, she gave a policy framework that is somewhat similar to the American Monroe Doctrine. And that's why many people dub this as Indira Doctrine, where she said that the Indian neighborhood belongs to India, and we have to make sure that no foreign country has any significant influence in India's neighborhood. And to that
Yeah.
extent, I would say that the R&W has been successful in maintaining a lot of influence in these countries, be it in Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. It looks like they're small countries, but these are countries that are capable of causing a lot of trouble to India in terms of the foreign policy because they are also smart. They have also understood the value of being non-aligned and playing multiple countries against each other and so on. But so it goes to the credit of the R&W that somehow India's neighborhood has remained friendly with India, minus of course Pakistan.
Yes.
This again is I mean I think that the credit to this must go to the R&AW. So I think that is why I'm not going into individual examples like the Bangladesh episode or the Sikkim episode because those are known already. But I think that at a grand strategic level, these are aspects that your listeners need to identify as the true
Yes.
successes of intelligence agencies.
Interesting. And I mean, just to step ahead, I mean, you can keep this answer very briefly as well, because we are not going into the tech part of the intelligence so much in this episode.
Mhm.
But in general, we have seen, like, I come from background of military satellite communication, and so we deal with defense and intelligence agencies demand on the satellite imageries or the satellite communications when it comes to intelligence operations. From that perspective, how have the advancements in technology affected the functioning and the capabilities of Indian intelligence agencies, from your perspective?
It's a mixed bag actually, Omkar, because Indian intelligence agencies are predominantly human focused, and
Yeah.
it's not a simple thing. Trust me, because uh, the West has been, at least the United States has been overwhelmingly dependent on technology, and that has been one of
Yes.
its weaknesses. So that also
Yes.
goes on to show that one of the wealthiest countries in the world is facing so much of difficulties in terms of developing human intelligence. And so if India is doing that really well, then that is also something
Yes.
that is noteworthy. But that is not to say that Indian intelligence agencies have no penchant for technology. They do. But since you're asking me to keep it brief and not go into too much details today, I can tell you that we've had some quite significant successes when it comes to technical intelligence. For
Yeah.
instance, monitoring of Pakistan's nuclear capability. One of the
Yes.
ways that we found out what Pakistan was doing was because in the early 70s, when Pakistan had this president named Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he had a close friend in Paris, and he used to always communicate with him and share all these details with him. And the R&AW was had intercepted this conversation, and they were listening to almost everything that was happening. Though there was some problem in the sense that they could only overhear one side of the conversation. But these kind of challenges were fixed eventually when you come down to 1999, when the Kargil War happened. Before the Kargil War happened, the intrusion had happened. The Pakistani, soldiers had come into India, but the world was unwilling to believe that these were actual Pakistani soldiers who had come in, because the narrative that the Pakistanis had put forth then was that these were Mujahideen. So
Okay.
what India did at that point in time was that they intercepted a conversation between Musharraf and his deputy. Musharraf at that point
Oh,
in time
correct.
was in China, so and his deputy was in Pakistan. So the R&AW intercepted this conversation and released it to the world, and so that was one of the significant coups that we have achieved. But again, it did result in the loss of the technology at that point in time. But I think that even after that, in coming into the 21st century, not going into details on this for very good reasons, but I know of instances where we have intercepted conversations between our neighboring countries and made sure that India's own covert operations are successful, and so the regimes that we have supported or regimes that are favorable to India are not harmed, and so on. So technology has played a very significant role, but we are predominantly human focused. But now we are looking at technology, but not in a positive sense. I mean, that's my bigger fear, because we're looking at technology as an alternative to human intelligence, because we have this. I think I can bring this up in some of the later questions if you have a question on the organizational management or manpower management. But
Yeah.
we have a very poor manpower management, and so because there has been an attrition on that front, right? We've been losing out a lot of manpower. We see some of us, some analysts at least seem to think that they can be replaced with technical gadgets, technical intelligence, which I am not too I'm not too bullish on that idea. So I think I'll stop
Interesting.
there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think you mentioned about the functionalities from the human intelligence perspective. So, coming to that part, I think you can try to address this briefly in this question also. And I think the question that I'm going to frame now, I think it's going to be very huge, but you can see how well you can basically put it in a good words or in a way, because I believe we can create a separate episode on this question for sure.
All
So,
right.
what does the recruitment and the training process look like for operatives in IB and R&AW?
Yeah, you were right in that sense that this requires a very detailed answer.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, you can
Because
you can answer it as per your perspective, I would say. Yeah.
so okay, to put it in a nutshell, to put it very briefly, Indian intelligence does not follow an open market system of recruitment. So what they have is a deputation form of recruitment. So you have bureaucrats from different other bureaucracies who come on deputation to the R&AW. In the IB, it is pretty straightforward. The mostly police officers who come. So that
Yes.
has been the way of recruitment. Because of this faulty way of recruitment, that then even goes on to affect the training as well. Because at least so far as the IB is concerned, they have some lower ranks which are not secretarial ranks or directorial ranks. They are known as ACIOs, DCIOs, and so on. They are direct recruits. They are direct recruits, and they're
Yes.
going to serve in the organization forever. So at least they have the luxury of undergoing a rigorous training process and so on. But for most other deputationists, uh, it's like they're quick capsules of training, and then most of the lessons are learned on the field. So it is a bit haphazard, uh, but there is both. There are some advantages to what has been happening, because you will always have to. So I'm a faculty member myself, right? Not in the Indian intelligence,
Yes.
but generally in the university. So when we develop modules, or when we develop a curriculum, we do it on the basis of the kind of students that we're getting, right? If I'm teaching master students who are already well versed with some aspects of intelligence, it'll be a bit more advanced. But if I'm sort of delivering a certificate course for about just say 2 3 months, then the nature of delivery as well as the content itself will be very different. So for all the
Yes.
problems that I mentioned in terms of recruitment itself, the training process has somehow organically evolved around that recruitment process. So there are both strengths and weaknesses to it, but that will require a longer discussion. So just to briefly to again to sum up what I was saying, Indian intelligence recruitment is a bit haphazard. It is
Yeah.
not as the founding fathers had envisaged at one point in time, and
Yeah.
now we are looking at a very serious trouble, because a lot of there is a dwindling of manpower, and not just that, it's just the quality of manpower, because most of these people are bureaucrats, like I mentioned, right? And there used
Yes.
to be a time when the best of our countrymen they prefer to be bureaucrats, but today the best talent does not go into the government; it's going elsewhere. So
Yeah.
if you're taking deputationists from a crowd that is not necessarily the best in the country, and then they are coming in as deputationists who can go back at any point in times, there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of worries and concerns as far as the future is concerned. But yeah, we can discuss that in detail at a later point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we have discussed about this operatives and the way they get trained and all. Uh, I would like to come now to the part of actually narrative building, basically. So, how do IB and R&AW maintain secrecy? Because we have seen that even I live in France, and the French intelligence has their own website. The CIA has their website. They are so much active basically in the public domain that sometimes you feel okay whether they're an intelligence agency or something else. So in terms when it comes to India, in terms of IB and R&AW, uh, how they maintain secrecy, because they don't even have the website, and how things basically go when it comes to the impact of public perception and trust, because no one really knows what is the budget of their of our intelligence agency. At least in US, if we see every 3 years or 5 years, I think they disclose the kind of national intelligence strategy that they have, the kind of budget they have allocated. But I think in India we don't have those things. So from your perspective, how do these agencies maintain the public perception and trust?
Okay, just to quickly comment on the budget aspect, right? You're a bit misinformed here, Omkar, because the IB's budget is, we can find it out. It's not a big deal. I think the Ministry of
Okay.
Home, it's only the R&Dw's budget which is held secret, because they draw their
Yes.
budget from the larger MES budget. So what portion
Yeah.
of it goes is something that's secret. But anyways, moving beyond and looking and addressing the larger question that you posed, which is about maintaining secrecy. You are right that compared to most of the Western countries, Indian intelligence agencies are more secretive.
Yeah.
And there is this, I think it's the 1823 Official Secrets Act, which governs the functioning of many of these intelligence personnel in India. So
Yes.
there are serious restrictions, and it is not good. My personal opinion is that it has not done much favors to for the organization, and that's why recently I penned that article for ORF as well. Because you see, I mean, many people went on to criticize me because they felt that I was denying the accusations on
Okay.
assassination. But actually, what I was targeting as far as the Western reportage was going was that they're saying that the R&AW is now targeting dissidents in foreign countries. And that's
Okay.
absolutely welcome. The agency doesn't do that. It hasn't done that, and these kind of accusations were done in the past as well. So when these kind of allegations are made, what avenue does the agency have to come and defend itself? So, there are none. So back in the day, during the colonial period and in the immediate post-colonial period, the Indian intelligence officers internalized this idea that we are known for our failures and not for our successes, and we don't comment,
Yes.
right? But
Yes.
in today's day and age, that really doesn't help. Right? We need you because most of your, especially in a country like India, where much of your criticisms come from within. They say that the United States is like the fountain of criticism or free speech and so on. That people can sit within the United States and criticize the US. I think
Yeah.
it's the situation is much more horrible in India, because much of the criticism that comes from India, it comes from Indians, and they're not founded, well founded in facts. They're just opinions being passed, and those
Yes.
are lapped up by some Western media outlets and so on, right? So, in order to remedy all of this, I think that the Indian intelligence agencies now they should start reconsidering their relationship with secrecy, right? To what extent they can have a relationship with media organizations. And in fact, I think that being one of the oldest intelligence agencies in the world, the Indian Intelligence Bureau, it deserves an official history of its own. The writing of an
Yes.
official, because the MI5 has it, right? So what is stopping the Indian Intelligence Bureau from writing one of it? Because I was reading somewhere that in 1987, the then director of Intelligence Bureau was his name was Mr. M.K. Narayanan, who later went on to be the National Security Advisor. He organized a party and he informed many people that now this is the centenary. And I mean, the IB personnel themselves did not know that, they're part of such an old organization and so on. So their morale was boosted so much, around that time, to know that they're part of this prestigious organization that has served for 100 years. And then they realized what kind of duty service they're offering to the country and so on and so forth. Now the public also needs to know this. The public needs to know what you have done, what are your successes, how have you kept India intact together, and all that, right? So for
Yes.
that, from all of that, from the point of view of informing the public about what the Indian intelligence has done in the past, what can be expected, and also because the very fact that there are these accusations of intelligence failures also, which most people
Yes.
don't understand what failure actually means and so on. You need the
Yeah.
intelligence agencies to come out of their ambit of, of secrecy, but that's not
Yes.
happening. The way I look at it, they're getting more and more secretive as time passes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only reason why intelligence agencies get secretive, honestly, from all my studies, I can tell you, is because they're doing something wrong. That's probably that they're serving the political parties and not the nation. If
Yeah.
that is not the case, then I don't think that any intelligence agency should have any worries in terms of opening up their archives, having some sort of public discussion, and developing mechanisms through which they can partner with the public. So all those kind of things, they need to happen. So I'm completely with you on that question of Indian intelligence agencies should open up, should embrace less of
Yes.
secrecy and more of transparency.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I believe, I think with time, as you mentioned, things are becoming much more secretive. But I think, yeah, there needs to be a change somewhere down the line
Yeah.
in the future, and I hope it happens. And I think from a little bit, from a futuristic perspective, what do you see as an expert? The future challenges and opportunities for IB and R&AW in the context of evolving global threats and the geopolitical landscape. You also mentioned a little bit about the Indo-Pacific as well, and I think India is becoming basically one of the prime, I would say, a nation to navigate the politics in the Indo-Pacific as well. So from you can bring in that context as well if you'd like to basically in the current domain of the geopolitical landscape.
Right, Omkar. See, since you asked me about the challenges and opportunities, let me tell you that the
Yeah.
size of India itself, the size of India, the population of India, the nature of the population, the quality of the population, because we are the world's largest English-speaking country today in the world, and so on. So, the geographical location of our country will always make India relevant. Will always make sure that the R&AW has some form of relevance in the emerging geopolitics and so on and so forth. But when you're asking me about the challenges, this is where I was trying to explain for a very long time that I don't see challenges coming from external sources. Because externally, what happens is whatever external developments happen, there is always time and space for intelligence agencies to adapt to those challenges that come up. Right? It's not that all of a sudden you have terrorism as a threat. It's not that all of a sudden, China is going to land up in your backyard and all. Those are gradually that will gradually happen, and as nations, New Delhi must know. I mean, they must be able to foresee those threats. We call this horizon scanning. We must be able to scan the horizon and see
Yes.
what kind of threats are coming up and so on and so forth. My bigger fear is the internal aspect. Internal aspect, as in the way these organizations are managing themselves, right? And that this is
Yeah.
simply not sustainable. One of the reasons why the R&W functioned so well in the 70s and 80s, and to this day, even though I say that the R&W functioned so well during those decades, people in the know will say that these were cowboys who did it. They were cows boys who did it. R&N Cow, who was the founder, his boys who did it because
Yes.
they were trained in a certain way. And they themselves tell me that it's impossible for a single R&W employee today to work in that fashion.
Yeah.
Right. So in terms of recruitment, in terms of training, in terms of manpower management, organizational management, and all these things, aspects, right? That is where the bigger threat lies, because the evolution of the external environment, right? That keeps happening, and we will keep adapting in one way or the other. But how are you going to manage this system? So because when the change occurs, right, you should be prepared to handle the change, and that I see
Yes.
not happening because these agencies have stagnated for a very long time. Even to this day, there is a lot of reliance on policemen. Many of the
Yes.
R&W recruits are coming from state police or some other police forces, and they are also officials who are getting into these agencies for different kinds of incentives. So this,
Yes.
so there is hardly any, I wouldn't say interest or the passion for intelligence in many of the intelligence personnel. The reasons why they're getting deputed to these organizations are not very noble. So that
Yes.
doesn't invoke any much confidence in me. So yeah, that is the serious challenge that I see for these agencies going forward. The IB
Interesting.
is a different thing, because since you asked about foreign policy, I'm not looking at the internal aspects today, and somehow the IB will be able to manage all of that. But as far as foreign policy goes, I think that now the R&AW will have to start thinking in terms of not just technology, because technology is something that comes in every discussion, right? Things are not going right. What do we need to do? What are the technological fixes that we have, be it AI or today Chat GPT or anything of that sort? But the human aspect is not discussed much, and that has got much to do with how culturally we are as a nation, culturally we are as a political system. So
Yes.
we see that as an elite business, and
Yeah.
some of the elite are some people who can only come through UPSC. That's not really true. Today, when you look at some of the best analysis that comes out on most of the foreign policy questions, they come out of universities, they come out of think tanks.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you ask me for some of the best experts on China here in India, I might be able to name you only one or two people who are from the intelligence background. The rest are all sitting in universities.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So if we are here today discussing that the geopolitics of the South Asian region or the Indo-Pacific region is likely to change over the next 10, 20 years with an emergent China or an assertive China, then I don't really know how the answers to China is is just available in this one particular organization, especially when it has limitations to collecting and gathering intelligence from China because of the nature of the Chinese state. It does not have access to much of the technologies, latest technologies. In fact, China is much ahead of India when it comes to technology. So I am assuming
Absolutely.
that their own counterintelligence must be stronger than the intelligence penetration that we can afford. Right. So in terms of
Absolutely.
all of this, we need to look at indigenization. We need to look at our own methods of gathering intelligence, and historically we've been more analytically oriented. And
Yes.
that's one thing that has been good about India. We are not the United States. We are not somebody. And I'm happy that when I meet some people, we don't have that kind of fetish for data. More data, so we have more knowledge, and so we're more intelligent. That's not how the world works, right? More
Yeah.
we know that more. I mean, we all have so much of information, but that's not made us any smarter than our previous generation. So
Yes.
that's how even how national intelligence works as well. So we are people of analysis. We are people of knowledge. So how do you develop that knowledge? How do you develop that analysis? And I think answers to those questions lie in the human factor, which I don't see, India changing anytime soon. And that I think is the more serious threat for the R&AW than the changing nature of geopolitics around India.
Interesting. Yeah, I believe a lot of things I think you mentioned in the conversation will be definitely carried forward in the next, I think, episode that we are going to organize again.
Mhm.
I believe quite a lot of questions popped up. Especially, I think the recruitment process is a thing. I think the first episode I think we recorded from that time, I have been receiving kind of messages from my network, basically to organize a separate episode on that. So I hope really, in the future we'll be able to record such episodes and address those questions as well in much more detail. I think even the technology part, as you mentioned about the fact that technology is something where we are lacking, but of course the human intelligence is something where we are very much expert on in the Indian domain, I would say. uh, so these questions I think should be much more addressed in a much more detailed manner, I would say. But I think, yeah, we had a
Yeah,
limited time space.
I agree,
Yeah,
Omkar. And also the question of
yeah,
intelligence failures. We didn't get to speak about intelligence failures today. You
yeah,
asked, you had one question about intelligence successes, and I gave you a broad answer about how successful
yes, yes,
an idea has been. But when it comes to intelligence failure, if you'd asked a
yeah,
question on intelligence failure, I would have needed another half an hour or an hour to talk about it, because
absolutely.
we don't have an understanding of what exactly intelligence failure is. So at the
Yeah,
I mean, I see so much of commentary coming out, not just from in the media, even in
yes,
academia. I get to review so many articles or chapters, and I read ones that are published and so on.
absolutely.
The number of times they claim that Indian intelligence has failed, and I keep wondering, what more could these agencies have done in that instance? So there is that fundamental misunderstanding of the concept of intelligence failure, the concept of
Yeah.
surprise and all that. So that is also an interesting discussion, and also a worthy discussion to be had, especially in the Indian context.
Definitely. Yeah, I think intelligence failure should be, I would say a different episode, because I think there are quite a lot of impact analysis that we can discuss over there, especially when it comes to public narrative.
Yeah.
Because the way I think the intelligence failure is framed, or even if it is not, I mean,
Mhm.
uh, things change. Basically it kind of changes the course of the complete event or incident, or I would say the course of the history as well at times, the way people perceive the intelligence failures. I mean, it's quite easy to say for the people, of course it's an intelligence failure, but I think yeah, the organizations, the way they operate, and sometimes things are not in your hands at the end of the day. So I think, so yeah, this aspects and the dynamics to discuss, I think we really need a few more episodes basically. For sure.
We'll be happy to come back on that.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So yeah, thank you very much, Dheeraj, for today's discussion, and I hope the audience loves this episode the same way that they loved the previous episode. And yeah, looking forward to host you again in the new episode in the coming weeks, basically. Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.